All right, everybody, welcome back to another Daily Drop. I'm Jacob Turner. He's Andrew Jones and AJ. We're here for another Carolina football-related drop. We're going to build off the one we actually just recorded. Little spoiler alert. We're recording these two back-to-back. And I like the idea that we're doing that because they kind of feed off each other a little bit. We put a podcast out the day before talking about what would be an acceptable season for Carolina football, an acceptable start to the season for Carolina football. And then we talked a little bit more about the rest of the season outlook. And in this one, we're going to be talking about what would be an acceptable or considered a good season for Carolina defensively under defensive coordinator in year one, Steve Belichick. And AJ, I think this is another fascinating, interesting conversation because I think it's going to have a lot of differing opinions from Carolina fans, which is what we want and why we do these in July. So, AJ, I'm going to read off the total defense stats. And I know total defense can be a little, there's more that you have to provide a little context to total defense, but we're going to focus on what Carolina has had total, they've finished the season ranked total defense wise since 2019. So essentially the Mac Brown era. They were 72nd last year in total defense, 97th in 2023, 116 in 2022. It's a bit stinky. 95 in 21. 58 in 2020. I haven't said stinky in months, by the way, so you guys should be proud.
A lot of people want me to ban that word from these podcasts, so I'm banning stinky right now.
I think I have a
you got to find a better word than that.
I think stinky is acceptable to say. If we have to talk about net again in December, the stinky word is going to be getting thrown out a lot. I'm just warning people about that now. I know this is basketball.
Go look at some synonyms of stinky.
Yeah, I'll look up some. So that'll be one of my off-season. I got a little more off-season time. Yeah. I got some time to look into that. I will. And then 2019, top 50. That was the only time under Mac they were top 50. Number 49, just sneaking in.
Larry's defensive players under Jay Bateman.
I know it's funny
how that.
It's funny how that worked out, didn't it? But I think the reason this is an interesting question is because we also did a Steve Belichick podcast. And one of the things we highlighted that was very intriguing about him in his one season at Washington, he took them from number 99 in total defense in Pac-12. This was a Pac-12 team that year, to number 26 when they moved to a conference of the Big Ten. Very interesting. So that is a big jump there. And also I think you can make a case and easily make a case, they were in a stronger conference the year they had that massive jump as well. So there's a lot to like about what he did there at Washington. Now, how does it translate to North Carolina, and what would Carolina fans consider a good season for the defense? So at first glance, my first argument, we were talking about this a little off camera, I looked at and I said, okay, top 50. It's an improvement. You're jumping a good amount of spots. You get inside the top 50, something Carolina hasn't done in, essentially 6 seasons. As long as your offense is pretty good, you could have a pretty good year with a top 50 defense and something to build on. Also with the sheer amount of new faces on this team, because when Matt came in, again, there were new faces, but this was kind of pre-portal era. So a lot of these guys were Fedora players, had been in the system for a little bit, and it was a little bit of a different time. Now you've got a huge amount of roster turnover. You've got a whole new staff coming in. You got a guy who's only in his second, there's a lot to like about him. He's only in his second year as a defensive coordinator at the college level. I think if you can make a 25 position jump on total defense, especially for a Carolina defense, it's just been as bad as they have been the last 15, 20 years. I think a lot of Carolina fans would maybe take that before the season starts. But as you alluded to, there's maybe a little bit more context that has to be thrown in there, especially when you look at last season's total defensive ranking. So AJ, I'll kick it to you. And I know you're not going to answer this one directly. You're going to talk a little bit more about some other stuff, but what would you consider a good season for Carolina defensively when you're just focusing on that kind of final season total defense number?
Yeah, I'm going to get to that in a second. Go back to 19. That defense had just 2 starting linebackers going into that season, had played 10 snaps in college as linebackers. One of them was a quarterback.
Yeah.
Transitioning over to linebacker, the defensive line was as thin as can be. And Jason Strobridge and Aaron Crawford were both playing. They both played over 90 snaps in that Virginia Tech game.
Oh, God, yeah. Man. Do you remember how exhausted they were after that?
Yeah. Aaron Crawford could barely move.
Yeah.
And that unit did it it was a very thin unit. It wasn't, some of those guys were really good, but they were very thin. They didn't get rest. So, and they did it against a schedule that's probably comparable to what they're playing now this year. I think there's a couple ways of looking at it. First of all, it's 72 last year. Some people were going to think this is a dumb thing to say. I'm just going to try to get perspective here. you can never toss out games, obviously. But if you want to look at how the defense was on a week in, week out basis, it wasn't always terrible last year. There were times it was okay because the JMU game was screwed up the stats all year. In fact, Matt came in Monday and said, well, our defensive stats are going to be ruined for the rest of the year on this one. Well, they were. And then they really kind of doubled down on it in the BC game when they pulled a complete no-show. I remember watching them get off the bus and it's raining, it's cold. I texted you guys in our group and said, they're going to get rolled today. And they got rolled. And they got completely rolled in that one. So there were times where they weren't rotten last year, but by and large, it was tremendous underachievement by the defense, given what the personnel should have been doing. And that's one of the reasons why there was a change. So you fast forward to now, there are a lot of players on that side of the ball that have played a lot of football and been pretty good, a lot of individuals. And I do think that since a lot of them are experienced, jump past the line of scrimmage, that the communication ought to be pretty good. I think these are guys that understand, what is required to be good defensively. It's not just being physical. It's not just being quick. It's not just popping guys. There's so much that goes into it. And you got to trust the coaching on this. They're going to coach them up, I would think. So I think they're going to be pretty solid. The big question is the defensive line. I did a drop last week and a half ago, where I said, look, I think maybe the defensive line, I may have undersold them early on because I went and dug deep into every one of those players. And while there are no proven stalwarts there, they do have some guys that have pretty good upsides. I think Bryce Yates could be really good. I think the kid from Delaware can be really good. I like what DeAndre Robinson from Florida. He was probably going to start at Florida. Mm-hmm. And the Gators are supposed to be pretty good. So if he's good enough to start there, he's probably going to start in North Carolina. So there are some numbers there. I think they have a chance to be maybe better than last year's group was, because last year's group didn't really develop as individuals. I mean, how much better was Des Evans? How much better was Kevin Hester? Jason or Javari Ritchie had a better year, but where did he get drafted? Mm-hmm. So these are a lot of four-star guys except Hester, but Hester played basketball in high school until his junior year. He went out for spring football in Florida State, and Boston College offered like the second day of spring. So people thought, hey, this guy could be really good, and he probably should have been better. So much newness. I think that leads me to kind of side with you, where I think the defense should be better. The numbers should be better. So the long way to answer your question here is, yeah, they should be in the top 50s. They should be in the top 50s in part because of their schedule. There are not a lot of great. Virginia has been really bad offensively under Tony Elliott. Stanford has not been very good offensively, and now they're reworking things in mid-stride. Cal lost Mendoza to Indiana, I read an article today where he's projected as a possible first overall pick in the NFL draft. SMU does have Kevin Jennings. They don't play SMU. See what I'm saying? Florida State has Thomas Castellanos. They don't play Florida State. So they don't play Miami and Carson Beck, but they play NC State, they play Duke, they play Wake Forest. So they play some teams. They play Syracuse with a new quarterback situation. I think that the schedule will help their defensive number. The other thing I think is going to help is they're not going to have a bunch of 3-and-outs that use up 40 seconds on the clock. They're going to huddle. They're going to consume some time. They're going to be fewer snaps. Fewer snaps mean fewer opportunities for opponents to gain yards. The defensive stat rankings, the total defense, is all based on total yards.
Yeah.
So if your opponent is running 65 plays as opposed to 78, they're not going to gain as many yards. So a lot of it has to do with that. So I think 40 is a number they probably need to be at, Jacob, because we don't know what the offense is going to be. We don't know if it's going to be prolific, if it's going to be, 3 yards in a cloud of dust, if they're going to be move the chains. We don't know what the offense is going to be. So I think 40 to 50 range is a must. Top 40, top 35 means this is a pretty good team. So that was the longest answer to a simple question in Western Hemisphere history.
But no, you had to provide. I like the context because you're absolutely right about that. And I'm looking down at my phone because I've been finally found the tweet I've been trying to find for hours. I went back in September of last year and kind of looked at where Carolina finished total defense wise, and I was going to say, we're sitting here kind of having this argument. Some Carolina fans would be like, no, I want a bigger jump. He went from 99 to 26 at Washington. I think he can come in and take us from 72 to 25 or 30. And the fact of the matter is, though, you have to have the context of the program in there, too. Last time Carolina had a top 30 defense, AJ, top 30 was 2009. And those wins don't even count anymore, technically. So, like, again, that illustrates kind of what that illustrates kind of what we're trying to say here is like what Steve Belichick did at Washington was fantastic and taking that jump. But if he was to do, let's say he took it from 72 and they jumped 60 spots like Washington did. So let's say he takes them from 72 to top 15. It would be the first top 15 defense Carolina has had since 2009. They were number 14 in 2009. Even the 2015 year, I know they gave up 6 billion yards to Baylor in the bowl game. They were only number 42, and that was an 11-win team. So you can have a lot of it depends on what the offense does too. If it does, is a top 50 defense good enough to win you X amount of games? Well, you have to know, like, what does the other side of the ball look like? What does special teams look like? There's so much more that goes into it. But I think you can make a strong case to say if Steve Belichick can come in and take them top 50, top 40 pushing it, that would be a heck of a turnaround and a lot of a positive step in the right direction in year one for a defensive unit that under Mac Brown, for the most part, I mean, their average ranking in total defense age was 81. This is a team that struggled, a defense that struggled for the most part. So I think top 50 is acceptable. Top 45, if you're feeling pretty good, like,
let me throw some perspective on what Belichick did, though. Not to throw a giant waterfall of water on top of your little flame there, but 99 to, what were they last year?
26.
26. Okay. This is why these stats sometimes don't matter. Mm-hmm. The team that was 99th, that offense was scorching the hell out of everyone.
Yes.
Michael Penix, they were scoring quickly and they scored a ton, and they were beating the snot out of everyone. So there were a lot of defensive series that maybe other guys were playing. They were trying to build some depth. They weren't really important series because the game wasn't on the line. Whereas last year, they played a lot more close games. Starters win there a lot more. There were a lot more must get off the field defensive series. So their numbers are going to be better, should be better, just as a basic result. If the 99 team, the 2 years ago team that played in the national title, if that same defense played with last year's offense, they probably would have been better than 99, is what I'm saying. So, but I still think 99 to 26 is such a massive jump that you have to give it a lot of credibility. You have to give him a kudos, and you have to expect something significant to move this year defensively. I don't think up to 26 is anything anybody should expect, but I'm with you. I think in the 40 to 50 range is something people should expect. And I'm going to go back to a line I've been using a little bit here, and I'm going to start using it more and more. That's what they're paying for. They're not paying for a defense to be number 72 or 62 or even 52. They're paying for a defense really to be top 30. Top 25, but given the circumstances, I think they'll take between 40, 45 in that range. I think they'll take that. They're paying for something significant.
Yeah. And again, I agree. I agree that these stats can kind of get skewed a little bit, and there has to be some context because, again, just to further, kind of address what you're saying, 2019 they were number 49, giving up 373 yards per game. Last year they're 72, so they're 23 spots deeper. They only gave up 2 extra yards a game. So it's like a lot of these stats can be very close in yards per game, but I think the easiest way why we decided to approach it like this is because total defense not only is the stat that's really shown or been thrown around for Steve Belichick's tenure at Washington, but it's usually the stat that kind of gets thrown around when you look at defenses. But just last thing I'll say, top 50, top 40 is really good. Am I crazy to think that Mac Brown's still in a job if he had a top 50 defense 5 out of 6 years?
I think he's still in a job
offensively. I mean,
I think he's still in a job if JMU doesn't happen, and then if that doesn't happen, maybe other things play out a little bit differently.
I mean, AJ, think
I'm telling you, look, I just went over to BC, and I'm not going to go too long on this, but I texted you guys in our group. They're going to get throttled. But they were not ready to play. I mean, I'm walking from the parking deck to the stadium. I didn't want to be there. At least during that walk, it was miserable. They didn't want to be there. Mac knew the heat was coming. And I'll never forget, and this isn't a whole long Mac thing, but I never forget, there were only a couple of us on the road because a lot of the guys were in Hawaii. I didn't go to Hawaii. I always stayed to cover football, that kind of thing. That might change in the future. But it was, DTH, maybe an IC intern, and me. And we go down to the press conference. We finally get down. In BC, the football stadium and basketball arena are connected. So the press box, if you turn around the press box, you go that other way, you're into the basketball arena. And we had to go downstairs and go in the same place for the press conference in football as it is for basketball. So we finally get down there and go down those little narrow halls, and we walk in, and Mac is sitting there, looked like he had just walked in from a tornado. And he's looking at some stats. He's just sitting there waiting for us. There's like nobody else in the room. We just walk in, we sit down, a local cameraman comes in and he answers the questions, and just the vibe was, well, that's it. And of course, sure enough, a couple of days later, it happened. So I think that the vibe would have been different the rest of the year had JMU not occurred.
You're absolutely right.
JMU opened the floodgates to everything else happen. And as I said in 2006, when Chuck Amato was fired at NC State, that he needed to give them some real ugliness on the field to open the door to give them the excuse to fire him. Mac needed to do the same thing. JMU gave them that, and the final straw was BC. Yeah. I think it was probably going to happen anyway, but the final straw was BC.
Yeah, and that's why I said it. Like, again, it's not crazy to think with how good Carolina was for the most part offensively and during his whole tenure. If they could have just mustered together a top 60 defense, top 55 defense, 5 out of 6, 6 out of 6 years, who knows what kind of, and I know it's what ifs, and I know they didn't do it, and they were a lot worse than that. But it's like, man, like you're kind of sitting there like, it would have been pretty good if they just had an average defense. I mean, I've been saying it for about 6 years. So
they had a bunch of average talent that wasn't developed enough. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing too. How are these guys being developed? They're just being developed to have better instincts. Mm-hmm. If they're being developed to be stronger in pre-snap, with the athletic ability these guys have, they're going to be a better defense. You could be a 5-star athlete, but be terrible in pre-snap. And when the ball is snapped, you're at best an average 3-star. Yeah. You could be a 3-star athlete, and you could be incredible in pre-snap and be an A+ during the week in the film room, and you're better than that 5 who is bad in pre-snap. And then it comes down to skills, how you do certain things, how you fend off blockers, that kind of stuff. This staff is being paid to teach that. That's why I'm going to use this a lot. What is Carolina paying for? They're not paying to make the same mistakes. They could end up having similar results, but how do they go about having those results? They are paying for something far more significant than what people have seen the last few years. This staff would have to bring in a guy like Des Evans, and after 5 years, he should be an NFL draft pick. Mm-hmm. And now a lot of that's on Des. A lot of that's on the staff. Maybe Des wasn't as passionate about football as he needed to be. Maybe the staff just didn't push the right buttons. Who knows? Maybe he was overrated from the beginning. We don't know. But whatever talent this staff has, developing talent is something they constantly talk about. Every time Michael Lombardi does an interview with anybody, he talks about developing talent. So if they develop the talent and do what they're paid to do and do what they say they're going to do, this defense should be 40 to 45.
I agree. Yeah, I think that's a great way to end it. Yeah. I think the fascinating part is, like, let's say Carolina does have a top 45, 50 defense. That's great. But, like, because of all this new regime, new roster turnover, like, what does the offense look like? Is the offense as prolific as it's been in the last few years? And there is a quarterback question. I like Gio Lopez a lot. I like Bryce Baker a lot. But, like, there is a massive question at the most important position on the team. So this is what's going to make the football season so intriguing and so interesting to watch. And it's going to be a story that is really, I know every season plays out week by week, but man, when year one of the Belichick, I think, especially with how the schedule sets up, which we talked about in the previous podcast, I think this is going to be a fascinating season to just see how it unfolds as the weeks go on. So yeah, man, I'm looking forward to it. 45 to 50 is our answer. We want to hear from you guys. Let us know in the comments.
I'm going 40 to 45.
Okay, 40 to 50. All right.
Gotta be different. We can't constantly say the same thing. I'm going 40 to 45.
Okay. I'll say you go 40 to 45. I'm going to say 45 to 50. And heck, if they were 55, I wouldn't be losing too much sleep over that.
Maybe in a month, I'll come in here and say 39, which is the number of first downs East Carolina got in 2014 against Carolina. In another 70 burger. Carolina in the last decade has given up 70 burgers to two teams that were not in power conferences.
I should.
How about that?
I'm going to change my answer. Top 25 or bust for the defense. First, they haven't done it in about 16 years, but top 25, man. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to keep it 45 to 50, maybe even a little bit higher than that. But I want to hear from you guys. I think 40 to 50 is the sweet spot.
Okay.
Again, some people, we're in different categories.
I think that's where we want to know what people think in there, like 40 to 50.
You go a little bit lower. I'm going a little bit higher, but I think that's the sweet spot right there. That's the range we're kind of looking at if you put our two together. So want to hear from you guys. Do you think top 50 is acceptable? Or are you kind of looking and saying, nah, man, with that turnover at Washington in 1 year, I think top 35 or bust. I mean, I can see where maybe you're coming from there, especially with what AJ keeps alluding to. What are you kind of paying for here? You want that instant success. If you're expecting that, then I think top 35 would be a valid argument. So we'll see. Want to hear from you guys. Want this to be an active comment section. Go check out the other video where we talked about what would be an acceptable start to the season for Carolina as well. I think that's a fascinating conversation we want to hear from fans on too. So I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Announcement coming soon. That's the last thing I'm saying on AJ. I'm not providing any more context on it. Announcement coming soon. We appreciate you guys. We'll see y'all next time. Thanks.
Thanks.